as you look at your financial situation, you have to ask yourself, where am I storing my resources? How am I contributing to my situation? And how well do I really understand the game that I'm playing? I can go out onto the street and ask somebody if they understand what they have their money in. And the answer is no, over and over. How much do you pay people? They have no idea. And what we need to really get across is we have to think like an economist, because if I lose $1 today, whether it's due to a market loss, whether it's due to an unnecessary fee, whether it's due to a tax, that dollar is now missing from my world and will be missing for the rest of my life.
From Goalpost Studios in downtown East Lansing, Michigan.
Hello and welcome to the Earn More, Keep More show,
where it's our job to give you tips, tricks, and strategies to earn more and keep more. I'm Dave McAndrews, and I believe that we should focus our marketing on messages that are all about our clients so that we can connect with them in a way that they can understand.
And I'm Matt Love, and I believe in being efficient with our companies so that we are able to keep more of what we make.
And we're back with the Earn More, Keep More show. And today's guest, we have the entrepreneur behind HindsightFinancial.com, not to be confused with the Conan O'Brien skit by a similar name, which was also Hindsight Financial. This is a real Hindsight Financial, but really designed to do the same thing, except for not tell you about what you could have had, but help you get what you could have without the regret. Without the regret. Avoiding the regret.
Yeah, if you could have what you thought you could have had, without looking back going, darn it, I wish I would have known that 20 years ago. That hindsight, you want to learn what the retirees are experiencing today, their hindsight, utilize their hindsight for your own plan at 45. That's what Mark does.
Because I know that I would much rather learn from other people's mistakes than my own mistakes, because other people's mistakes are much less painful to me.
And costly. And
so Mark, tell us a little bit about Hindsight Financial. When did you start this company?
Well, sure, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Welcome, buddy.
So Hindsight Financial is kind of the birth child of a lot of years of frustration in the financial services world. What I was finding over and over is by doing the things that the industry has taught me as an advisor to do with my clients, and even though we were doing a good job, doing what most people thought were the right strategies, I was encountering, alongside my clients, a lot of frustrations and hidden pitfalls that most people aren't even aware of as they approach retirement. And most of our industry and most of the things that we're taught and trained to do are really a result of kind of an experimentation with financial services, primarily in the accumulation phase of wealth. So if you look at the demographics of where we sit today, we're on the front end of the baby boomer generation reaching retirement. So really up until this time, there hasn't been a huge test of people being left to retire to their own devices. It used to be you work for the same company for 30 years.
Especially where Hindsight is located, in the greater Detroit area. You have a lot of folks relying on those pensions and things like that. Yep. Well, congratulations, pensions don't exist anymore for a lot of people. So,
and even the
so
ones
that's
that do
what
exist might not even pay out. Remember when Detroit was going bankrupt?
Just cut the pensions. They won't mind, right? Yeah. Why do they need that? So your folks were getting to retirement and found out that kind of the strategy that they were faced with, which is a post-pension world, it's not quite what it was cracked up to be. Is that kind of the gist?
Well, they're definitely missing the pensions of yesteryear.
Sure.
As I was saying, you used to work for a company for 30 years. You would retire to a pension and your gold watch and typically live about 2.8 years after that, and that was the end of ballgame.
Which makes pensions a good deal for the companies as well.
Absolutely.
But if you're going to live an extra 30 years, forget that. Need to cut those things out.
Yeah, so what you find is when people are making that leap and no longer going to work to earn a paycheck, and they're now relying on their assets, their nest egg, and the decisions that they've made over their working years of how they've allocated their resources. And now they're being left with those decisions to being able to fund potentially 20, 30, and even 40 years into the future. it introduces a lot of variables that I don't think a lot of people paid a lot of attention to as the financial services industry came of age. So we're really starting to see where the rubber meets the road with the baby boomers as the front end of that demographic reaches retirement. And I became very frustrated with the results of a lot of the typical planning strategies and sharing some of those frustrations with my clients. And it started to really hit me. And I really had to take a step back, almost away from the business to really pause and reflect on, what is the problem and what is retirement and how have we been positioning ourselves to handle that? And when you think about it, it's really staggering because most people who are good savers, if they're lucky, they've saved consistently for maybe 20, 25 years. And we're hoping that in those 20 to 25 years of saving leftover money, that it'll grow to a pile of money large enough to sustain the lifestyle that we want in retirement for 30 and 40 years moving forward. Well, that's a math problem that doesn't work. And it hasn't worked in any society anywhere in the world. So this is where we start to find ourselves.
Which is why the Inuits had the ice drift.
Yeah.
When you're no longer able to contribute to the community, you just walk out on the ice drift. Well, we don't have ice drifts anymore. So now we have to figure out how to live well into our retirement. There's no more going out into the shed or whatever. You need to be able to take care of yourself.
No, now
for
the shed is
retirement.
called Social Security, and the government pays for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens when you don't have enough. Everybody else will pay.
So really, when I started to think through this problem and how we approach it, we tell people to do things like save their leftover money in a retirement account that goes up and down with the market. So the fact that it goes up and down introduces risk. So that's the first element. We have to understand the risk of what happens if our money does go down in value. So there's a whole industry devoted to helping people understand what level of risk are you comfortable taking.
Which, another way to say that is, how much of your money are you willing to lose?
And unfortunately, nobody says it that second way. But when you start to say it to people, that framing of the conversation differently changes their whole perspective.
What people don't understand is much of the machinery around Wall Street is not there in order to make everybody go up. About half of the street is there tearing companies apart, shorting companies, finding ways to make Elon Musk's hair fall out, things like that. Just really, there are some forces in the market that are very anti-market. They're there to tear and destroy and create wealth for themselves in that way. So it's not like the market is not this benevolent thing that is looking to raise all boats. It's not this thing that is really looking out for the benefit of all people. And this is one of the big arguments whenever you get the Social Security question versus privatizing Social Security and doing all of those sorts of things and moving Social Security to 401ks. And that mentality is basically you are taking the Christians to the lions, to put it in the ancient Roman terms, because there are lions working within that market in order to tear apart whatever is in there. Mm-hmm. It's not this benevolent thing. And the idea of how much money are you willing to lose?
Yeah.
Well, if it's the money that I have to live on for 30 years into my retirement, I don't really want to lose very much of that.
Yeah, very true. And when you do reach retirement and you're counting on your assets to become your income source, your assets become the engine that drive income. We can't tolerate losses at that period of time in our lives. And our industry has done creative things like creating target date funds that automatically shift risk over time.
But isn't that funny how confident your clients can be?
Oh,
target date fund. Like I have people go, I have my money in a target date fund, so I'll be fine. It's set to really do well. By the time I retire, because it's got the date and the name. The date's there, so it's going to do well. It says the year I'm going to retire, so it's going to do well.
Yeah, somebody decided that as I get closer to retirement, I need to take on less risk. And it actually has zero to do with what's going on in the economy at the time, what's going on in the market at the time, and what's going on in my own personal financial world at the time. It's basically just an algorithm that adjusts things over time. And it's become the default mechanism because what they were finding was they weren't getting employees to contribute to the retirement plans of employers. And because it's important for the more sophisticated employers to be able to contribute to their own plans, it benefits them if they can get more participation by their employees.
Well, now they require it too, don't they?
Well, now many companies are doing an automatic deferral of employees' pay. And if the employee doesn't step in and make some sort of investment allocation, target date funds are a very popular choice, as are fixed rate funds. But my whole thinking on that is, if we can just go back to basics and say that we can all understand that someday we're not going to be able to work and earn money, we're still going to have expenses. So that means we have to save some money today so that it will be available tomorrow. That's a simple concept. And if we go back to our childhood, we probably all learned the earlier you start saving, the better off you'll be, because over time your money can grow and it can compound. And this is where I always fall back on my good friend Albert Einstein, who in his infinite wisdom pointed out that compound growth and compound earnings is the eighth wonder of the world. It's actually my money earning money. And that is a lesson that stuck with me. And it probably, 20 years into this business, leading up to about 2 years ago, it didn't occur to me to even recall that memory, that message, because somehow, somewhere along the way, that good, solid piece of economic advice turned into, let's start throwing money into an unpredictable casino that we call the market, and hopefully everything will work out. When we start to identify what does an employer or what does a retiree want in retirement out of their income, ask them to define it. Talk about the characteristics. Do we want income that rises and falls 1 week to the next, or do we want something that's reliable and repeatable and consistent? Time after time, they choose consistent. But yet you look at how their money is invested, and it's invested in things that they don't understand, that can go up and go down in value with or without them even understanding what's going on with their money. So I've just seen so many layers of complexity added to the basic message of save your money early, save it often, let it compound and grow, which is truly the key to wealth. It's the key to escaping the day-to-day grind of the middle-class rat race.
One of the things that you mentioned a few times now is the volatility of the market and how just the general unpredictability. Well, we just came off of a year after a pretty sweet 10-year run where everything's coming up roses. We're just coming off of a year or a quarter that did not look like that at all.
Right.
And looking at the market in general, which everything looks great if you're getting 20% returns, but if you lose 20%, it feels different.
Absolutely. And going back to the risk conversation is how much money can you afford or stomach losing? And they're different questions, because you might be able to afford to lose half of your money. That doesn't mean you can stomach it. So really, somehow over time, as we've transitioned from old school savings to, I don't know, it's a mix between gambling and investing. And for most people, I would call it gambling. Because if you don't understand what you own, why you own it, and what influences its price movements, you're really taking on more risk than you probably should be taking on. But that also begets an entire industry of people who can come alongside you to help you, and there's a whole profit center for that type of activity.
And you had mentioned just the level of complexity.
Yeah.
And the level of complexity is what allows things to be productized and sold.
Sure.
Because if I can make something simple and package it as a product, I can now sell you on that idea. Versus a principle, like an economic fundamental principle that is not neatly packaged into a, just sign here and we'll allocate those funds to this particular fund.
Sure. And that's not to say that there aren't great advisors out there. I think like anything else, there are great advisors. There are great people who are mediocre advisors. But the bottom line is you as the consumer should always understand the amount of complexity you're taking on, the amount of risk that you're taking on. The whole premise behind Hindsight is after taking clients through these processes and taking them through traditional financial planning standards, getting them to the point where they're retired and then seeing the stresses and the struggles that they faced, even though they'd done a good job doing what everyone else told them was the right thing to do, really caused me to look at that whole problem and say, how are we approaching this? And what are our guiding principles? And one of the first guiding principles comes from Warren Buffett. The first rule of money is don't lose money. And
What's rule number 2?
That seems pretty basic. Rule number 2 is see rule number 1 if you forget. Right? But time after time.
Rule number 1.
You can't find somebody at retirement's doorstep right now who can't tell you a sob story of how they lost substantial amounts of money at some point along their life because of a poor investment decision or because of how the market treated them.
I mean, in my lifetime, since I graduated college, 2001, the tech bubble, people and people's retirements, regardless if it's in a target date fund or not, it's in the market.
Right.
They're going to see some sort of pushback from the fall of 2000, 2001, and then 2008, that recession, that hurt grandma and grandpa's portfolio.
Sure. And what you see is when people are coming out the other side of a recession like 2008 is a recency bias. They're scared to death to get back into the market. And for many, they miss the big recovery because they're waiting to see things get better or improve before they'll dip their toe back in. And meanwhile, everyone else already enjoyed a heck of a ride up, replacing those lost dollars. So you really find yourself trying to time the market, no matter how much we think that you can't do it. That's what everybody's trying to do. And it's the exact opposite of what we know to be true. See, investing, it means I want to buy low and I want to sell high. But if you think about when the market is on fire and everything is great, that's when everybody's talking about investing and they want to get in. In 2008, we had almost a 50% off sale and nobody showed up. It's funny, we have one of these industries, we have a big sale and everybody runs away. But the sophisticated people were there and they can make money in up markets and down markets as well.
Give me Mark, a couple examples of, when you deal with, when you work with someone who's nearing retirement, wants to start living off of their assets, what are 2 or 3 of some of the most popular things that they wish they knew 15, 20, 30 years ago? Like some of the hindsight perspectives that a retiree is living through that some of the listeners might want to know now.
Well, I think one of the first things that comes up is when we have that fresh perspective or that conversation about loss. And now that they're really starting to face the facts that they're going to be left with what they've created, it really, you start to see a shift from I want to grow and I want to see my assets go up to more of a focus on I want to protect what I have because I'm scared to death of losing it. And that's one of the fears and the anxieties that I think really plagues retirees today is they don't really have the freedom to go out and enjoy themselves because they're scared to death that if they're one market recession away from outliving their assets by a long way.
So the first example would be market loss.
The first example would be is where my money lives, where I store my wealth, my treasure, determines a whole lot more about my retirement than what the day-to-day, year-to-year rate of return is.
I used to say when I meet with people too is that, you could do a calculation, $100,000 at 9% for the next 20 years, or let's use Dave Ramsey's 12% for the next 20 years. That's a boatload of money. But if life worked like calculators, there'd be a lot more millionaires walking around than there are today.
Sure.
So what you're talking about is that they saw some good years, but then those bad years really hurt their income when they actually got to retirement. So that market volatility.
The market volatility doesn't matter nearly as much to a young accumulator who's got a lot of time till retirement. But if you're the retiree who's looking to retire 1 year from today, what happens in the market right now is absolutely critical and it'll make or break your entire retirement.
So if you are concerned with market volatility, you need hindsight.
You absolutely need hindsight. You absolutely need hindsight. And what's changed in my approach to money is really to have more of a intense focus on who's confiscating my money. where does my money go and who all has their fingers in my rice bowl, so to speak. Because there are countless industries out there.
Fingers in my rice bowl. This is a term I've never heard before.
Yeah, I got to give props to
Is this an Asian family,
yeah,
perhaps?
this goes back to Stephen Luigi Piazza at Rock Financial back in the good old days. He always was really sensitive. Anytime somebody's compensation was going to be affected by anything, and you don't want to put your fingers in somebody's rice bowl. And that stuck with me. But if you think about it, you don't think about your rice bowl when you're 35 years old, raising kids, putting money in your retirement accounts.
Who are some of the entities that end up confiscating?
Well, I like the word confiscation because, first and foremost, to be fair, everybody has to earn a living. And I do believe that people who provide value in your world should be compensated. Yeah, we don't want to cross up compensation and confiscation.
Absolutely.
However,
Drink.
If you don't understand what's going on with your money, and if you don't understand where you're losing money unnecessarily, unknowingly, or you're doing things you didn't even realize you were doing, to me, that is very important because that's almost like it's a hole in the bottom of your bucket. And while most people are concerned of how quickly they're filling their bucket and what the market is returning to their bucket, they're not paying attention to the holes in the bottom of their bucket. And that is money that's flowing through their fingertips. And it's very difficult.
What are some of the key entities that money goes to eventually?
Well, sure. And the big players, obviously, are the large financial institutions, the banks, and the good old U.S. government. You know, we have a very complicated tax system, and I don't believe it's complicated by accident. I think it's very much by design. So we have well north of 30,000 pages of revenue code and probably another 60 to 70,000 private letter rulings by the IRS. Why so complicated? So
because the special interest people that lobbied to write it, it takes a lot of pages to get all that stuff in there.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. And those are things that we don't think of on the way up because we're not using the accounts. We're not using the money. We're just filling them, and we're not always paying attention. The first time a retiree goes to his accountant or his CPA with his tax return, and he's no longer an employee who had his income withheld all year long, he's been living off of his portfolio, and depending on where he took his income from out of his portfolio, that will determine the amount of tax they pay. Well, for many people, they play the tax game by, I wait till the end of the year and I find out, do I owe money or am I getting a refund? And if we get a refund, we celebrate. We think it's a great thing. And they're missing the boat because they're not paying attention to how much they're actually paying in taxes. The refund just means you withheld too much.
Or in the case of this year, they're really angry that they actually have to pay at the end of the year because they did not withhold enough so that they would have their same refund that they're used to.
Oh, for sure. And for the retirees, for many people, that's the first time they're ever going to have to reach into their checkbook and write a check to the United States Treasury. And if you're trying to live a middle-class, modest income, you're still going to write a very large check, probably some of the largest checks you'll ever write, to the Treasury. And that's when I see, you ever wonder why you see a table of grumpy old men at Panera Bread every morning at 7 o'clock?
I assume prostate problems.
These are the guys that are running the world because they've got that perspective of the retiree and how they've been maybe mistreated. I almost said a different word.
Mistreated.
How the system has been stacked a little bit against them.
You know, I want to bring up one point too before you keep going because you have so many good points here. But if your CPA or your accountant is just doing your tax returns,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably missing out on long-term tax advantages.
Oh, for
If they
sure.
just look at this year's tax returns, do your return, move on, you are missing out on massive opportunities. And I'm quoting an accountant that I use in Nashville, J.D. Frost, but he's got a great company down there that does phenomenal work. But they do a lot more than just doing tax returns.
Yeah, again, the tax system is complicated, and how we play that game through our working years will determine how the game plays us in our retirement years. And when I ask retirees over and over again, hey, how much of your monthly income this month do you want to voluntarily share with the IRS? The answer is always the same. None.
None. Yeah.
None. And unfortunately, because of how we've taught and trained people in our industry to accumulate their retirement savings, what we find is most of the people are accumulating their wealth in accounts that have never been taxed throughout their working years. So things like IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, 457s, the alphabet soup of Uncle Sam's retirement accounts. So Matt, you had asked earlier, what are some of the big areas of hindsight? Well, if you have gone your entire life without paying taxes on those dollars, and now it's time to pull those dollars out, now it's time for you to truly learn.
So let's define those dollars. So those dollars, are you talking about your 401ks, IRAs, these in tech or in financial lingo terms, qualified accounts?
Absolutely. So an individual can have an IRA, you can have different versions of employer-sponsored plans, the 401ks, the 403bs. Those are all plans that are deemed qualified, and all during our working years, we're taught and trained that those are given special tax advantages. And the advantage of it is, for a worker, is, hey, when I put money into this account, I don't have to pay the tax on it right now. So that's an advantage. Now turn the tables, and you're the retiree who has never paid the taxes on the dollar. Every dollar that I now want to spend,
You are now qualified to pay taxes
you
on
are
every
now
dollar.
qualified to pay those taxes. And the tax code has a way of people don't understand your taxes will go up even if your taxes don't go up. So we focus on things like the tax rates and the brackets. But if you think of during your working years, you have things like a mortgage interest deduction, which is a very powerful deduction, and the government is constantly looking at taking that back from us too. We have our children, which can be exemptions. We have all kinds.
I got 5,
That's
so
right.
lots of exemptions.
Yeah, you're doing well.
And Matt's going to have his first exemption.
Woohoo! Congrats.
Congratulations.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I have a little baby onesie ready for her to wear. It says tax credit.
Yeah, absolutely. So over time, even if you earn steady income, even if your tax bracket never changes, my mortgage interest deduction went away because everybody told me it was a good idea to pay off my house. My exemptions for my children are now gone because they've been grown and raised and they're off on their own. So all of the things that are basically sweetheart deals from the IRS during those working years, we tend to squander those. And instead, we push everything off till retirement when we don't have anything else to hide behind. And what really worries me is, as a country, we're $22 trillion in debt. We haven't paid for anything in 30 years as a country. It's all gone on a credit card. A lot of it to the Bank of China. So now we find ourselves in a spot where we have the lowest tax rates in our country's history and the largest debt that we've ever had, and it's skyrocketing over $1 trillion a year. Where do we think tax rates are going to go, given that math?
Yeah, we actually had the tax day special a couple weeks ago, and that tax day special, we pointed out some of those same ideas, that this low rate environment is something that we really need to take advantage of. If you are concerned about volatility in the stock market, if you are concerned about the taxes in retirement, you need hindsight.
You don't know what you don't know.
As you look at your financial situation, you have to ask yourself, where am I storing my resources? How am I contributing to my situation? And how well do I really understand the game that I'm playing? I can go out onto the street and ask somebody if they understand what they have their money in. And the answer is no, over and over. How much do you pay people? They have no idea. And what we need to really get across is we have to think like an economist, because if I lose $1 today, whether it's due to a market loss, whether it's due to an unnecessary fee, whether it's due to a tax, that dollar is now missing from my world and will be missing for the rest of my life. It means it will not earn interest, it will not grow, and it will not compound. So anytime I make a money decision today, there's a ripple effect that produces a substantial outcome later in life. When I share what I've learned with people about how they've approached money and how I used to approach it as an advisor, when I share what I've learned with that, the same 3 things kept coming up over and over. I wish somebody would have told me this 20 years ago. I wish I had met you back then. Why isn't everybody teaching this message? And how come everyone isn't doing it that way? And I kept hearing that over and over, and it resonated in my head. And somehow just the thought of hindsight came into play. And as if I could just take what I've learned, and if I could take the mistakes of others and the key lessons that I've learned along the way and share that with people. There's a great demand out there for it. I think people are being underserved in the market, and I think the real rubber is going to be meeting the road over the next 20 years as the baby boomers move along the pipeline of retirement.
And we're actually going to put up on our website as a resource the Hindsight Financial 10 Things I Wish I Had Known, so that people can take a look at those. But I really believe that there are a couple of things that are recurring here, and that is people, they don't pay attention, they don't know, and if people really took a look under the hood of what was going on and thought about it for a minute, everyone would be better off if they just did that, if they just understood where they were. And I think as kind of a culture, we're conditioned to just get into this system and start swimming, and good luck with how it works out in the future, especially when you're in the, I think you called it the accumulation stage.
Sure.
So a lot of our listeners are business owners and entrepreneurs who need to keep their eye on the ball. They need to focus on what they're doing to make sure that their businesses are growing. And when you are doing that, it often comes at the expense of your future self. And whether that's in the case of your health or your finances or your marriage, whatever it is, it's very easy to focus so much on that accumulation and making sure my business is okay today that you're neglecting many of the other parts of life. And this is a really important one, that if people can just take the time to think about the ramifications and what the impact on the future self can be, and how to change that, to get that hindsight before you need it.
Right.
I think there's going to be a lot of folks better off if they're able to do that. And I appreciate the work that you're doing, and really glad you were able to come out today. Any closing thoughts for Mark here, Matt?
Yeah, I think what he does is wonderful. It's all in line with what I believe in keeping more. I think the biggest takeaway is those things that you mentioned, the fees and the market volatility and the taxation ramification, is the account value.
And
Confiscation, yeah. The account value is secondary to how much you can actually keep.
Yeah.
But what does the financial industry get paid on? The account value.
The account value.
So as for anyone listening, start talking to your advisors, your CPA. Are you doing my tax return, or are we doing tax planning forever? Talk to your investment advisor. Are we trying to save money, or are you trying to set up a plan so that I can spend the most for the rest of my life?
Yeah, you really have to take a long view with your money. It's like anything else. A good CEO of a company has to take the long view of how they position that company's resources to be successful in the future. And unfortunately, there are so many demands that cause people to make short-term decisions that unfortunately you end up with a collection of short-term decisions over 20, 30, and 40 years that when you reach retirement's doorstep, you're kind of just sitting back hoping, I hope all of those decisions worked out.
Here's the takeaway.
When I share what I've learned with people about how they've approached money and how I used to approach it as an advisor, when I share what I've learned with that, the same three things kept coming up over and over. I wish somebody would have told me this 20 years ago. I wish I had met you back then. Why isn't everybody teaching this message? And how come everyone isn't doing it that way? And I kept hearing that over and over, and it resonated in my head. And somehow just the thought of hindsight came into play. And as if I could just take what I've learned, and if I could take the mistakes of others and the key lessons that I've learned along the way and share that with people. There's a great demand out there for it. I think people are being underserved in the market, and I think the real rubber is going to be meeting the road over the next 20 years as the baby boomers move along the pipeline of retirement.
And we're actually going to put up on our website as a resource the Hindsight Financial 10 Things I Wish I Had Known, so that people can take a look at those. But I really believe that there are a couple of things that are recurring here, and that is people, they don't pay attention, They don't know. And if people really took a look under the hood of what was going on and thought about it for a minute, everyone would be better off. If they just did that, if they just understood where they were. And I think as kind of a culture, we're conditioned to just get into this system and start swimming. And good luck with how it works out in the future. Good stuff. Well, much appreciation. Thank you so much for coming out. Really appreciate the message that you're trying to get out. If you're worried about confiscation, if you're worried about the tax rates in retirement, if you're worried about volatility in the market, you need Hindsight. Go to hindsightfinancial.com. And as always, don't forget to check in at earnmorekeepmore.show.
We'll probably have that download on our website too.
Yep. We'll have that downloadable for everybody out there, and make sure that you get access to that. And as always, join us on the socials.
The socials.
We appreciate all the comments and shares that we get out there, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.
Thanks, Mark, for being here.
Thank you both for having me, and thank you for what you guys are doing out here. Good job.
Thank you. Bye now.
See you guys.
Drop the mic.
Well, thank you for listening to the earnmorekeepmore.show. Do not forget to hit that subscribe button below so that you can make sure you're up to date on all the new episodes. And if you want to be a guest, we would love to hear from you. On our website, we have an easy downloadable form where you can put in your information and share with us your experience of how you've turned a problem into a process.
We are all about our listeners, and we want to make sure that our listeners are finding a place. And we are most excited for you guys to share with us how you are earning more and keeping more. We look forward to hearing from you.
This has been a Goalpost production.
That's it for us. We are your hosts, Dave McAndrews and Matt Love. Our executive producer and creative guru is Jennifer McKinstry. Our social media director is Mark Farnes. And a very special thank you to Lansing's own Jose Moore for providing the music.
Thanks for listening.